Welcome back, guys, to the Manhattan Podcast Series, Episode 5. Don't be Nokia. Nokia once controlled half of the world's mobile phones. Half. Not a market leader, not a dominant player in a competitive field. Half. In the early 2000s, if you picked up a mobile phone anywhere on the planet, in New York, in London, in Tokyo, Lagos, in Sao Paulo, there was a roughly 50% chance it was made by Nokia. That is a level of market dominance that is almost impossible to comprehend in hindsight. No single company controls half of any major global market today, but Nokia did. And then Apple released the iPhone, and Nokia disappeared almost overnight. Nokia didn't lose because they were a bad company. They didn't lose because they ran out of money, or because their products stopped working, or because their leadership team was incompetent. Nokia lost because they didn't realize the industry had changed. They were playing the old game perfectly, while Apple had already started playing a completely different one. Welcome to Manhattan. Manhattan connects capital to private credit markets and real-world opportunities that were previously inaccessible to most investors. But more importantly, we study industries that failed to adapt, because understanding how companies lose when the game changes is one of the most valuable things an investor can do. The same pattern keeps repeating. The names change. The industries change. The technology changes. But the pattern is always the same. To understand what happened to Nokia, you have to understand what Nokia actually was at its peak. Nokia was not a tech startup that got lucky. This was a company with deep roots, founded in Finland in 1865, originally as a pulp mill. Over more than a century, the company reinvented itself multiple times into rubber goods, into cables, into consumer electronics, before finding its calling in mobile phones in the 1990s. And in mobile phones, Nokia was extraordinary. If you're alive in the late 1990s and early 2000s, it's almost a certainty that you had a Nokia. The 3310, a phone so robust it became a cultural symbol of indestructibility. The 3210, the 6310, the flip phones, the candy bar models, simple, reliable, beautifully engineered devices with battery lives measured in days rather than hours. Nokia's engineering was world class. Their supply chain was also world class, and their distribution, reaching customers in developed and developing markets alike, was world class. They weren't just winning the mobile phone industry, they had built what appeared to be an unbreakable competitive position. 50% market share, astronomical. More than 1 billion phones sold. A brand recognized on every continent, and internally, genuinely, the belief that they were unbeatable. Then came January 9th, 2007. Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Fran and announced that Apple was releasing 3 products: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. The audience cheered after each one, and then Jobs smiled and said, "These are not 3 separate devices. This is the one device, the iPhone." Nokia's response in days and weeks that followed was telling. Their executives noted that the iPhone was expensive, that it had no physical keyboard, which business users required, that the battery life was poor compared to Nokia's devices, that Apple had no experience in the telecommunications industry, no carrier relationships, no distribution network for phones. All of which was true and completely besides the point, because Nokia was evaluating the iPhone as a phone. Apple hadn't built a phone. Apple had built a pocket computer that happened to make phone calls. The distinction sounds subtle. It wasn't. A phone's competitive advantages are hardware, build quality, battery life, network compatibility, signal strength, and physical durability. The pocket computer's competitive advantages are software, the operating system, the applications, the ecosystem, the ability to do things that no physical keyboard or hardware feature could ever enable. Nokia was optimizing for hardware. Apple was building a software platform. And software platforms scale in a way that hardware never can. What happened next is one of the fastest collapses of market dominance in business history. The App Store launched in 2008, a year after the iPhone. Within a year, there were 65,000 applications available. Within 3 years, there were 500,000 games. Navigation, banking, photography, social media, health, productivity, an entire digital economy built on top of Apple's platform. Android launched alongside iOS, and within a few years, Samsung, using Google's operating system, had built a smartphone business that rivaled Apple's. Touchscreens became the universal standard. Phones became cameras, replacing the dedicated camera industry. Phones became GPS devices, replacing standalone navigation units. Phones became music players, replacing the iPod. Phones became wallets, replacing physical cards for millions of transactions. The mobile phone became the center of people's entire digital lives. And Nokia, the company that had built the most reliable, most widely distributed hardware phones the world had ever seen, just couldn't keep up because the industry they had mastered no longer existed. The mobile phone business had become a software business, and Nokia was a hardware company. By 2013, just 6 years after the iPhone launch, Nokia's mobile phone division was sold to Microsoft for a fraction of what it had been worth at its peak. The company that controlled half the world's phones was gone. So, what are the lessons from Nokia, guys? There are three main ones, and they are worth holding on to. First, industries don't stay the same, they transform into something else entirely. Nokia was in the phone business, then the phone business became the software business. Nokia knew how to make phones, Nokia didn't know how to build software platforms. Those different skills, different cultures, different business models, and the gap between them cost Nokia everything. Secondly, hardware becomes software. Products become platforms. Companies become ecosystems. This is one of the defining transitions of the last 30 years, and it is still happening. Every industry that can be converted from a physical product into a digital platform eventually will be. The question is never whether the transition is coming, the question is when. And lastly, this is perhaps the most important. Market leaders often lose not because they fail at what they're doing, because they optimize the old system instead of building the new one. Nokia just kept making better phones, better hardware, longer battery life, more durable builds. They were exceptionally good at being a phone company, right up until the moment being a phone company was no longer enough. The biggest risk isn't competition. The biggest risk is an industry change. Nokia didn't lose to Apple. Nokia lost to a new business model. And Nokia wasn't the only company this happened to. Before Google, there were search engines, Yahoo, Alta Vista, Ask Jeeves. They controlled how people navigated the internet. And then Google changed the underlying logic of search, and everything else became irrelevant almost instantly. And that's the story we've already told in this series. The reason we keep going back to these stories is because the same type of industry shift, the same conversion from hardware to software, from product to platform, from institution to network is happening right now, guys, in the capital markets. Banks think they are in the lending business, and they are, in the same way Nokia was in the phone business. They have the relationships, they have the balance sheets, they have the decades of infrastructure built around the way capital currently moves. Through loan officers, credit committees, manual underwriting processes, lengthy documentation, slow approvals, they are very good at what they do. And the industry is changing underneath them. Private credit is growing at a rate that would have seemed implausible a decade ago. Capital that used to move exclusively through bank balance sheets is now moving through private credit funds, direct lending platforms, and digital marketplaces that connect investors directly to borrowers. The industry is shifting from institutions to networks, from banks to capital markets, from slow relationship-gated approvals to direct capital market flows. And the companies and platforms that understand this shift, that are building a new infrastructure rather than optimizing the old ones, will define capital markets for the next generation. The ones that don't, well, they will become the next Nokia. Manhattan connects capital to private credit markets and real-world opportunities. If you want to be part of the future of private capital markets, join the Manhattan Network today. And remember, don't be Blockbuster, don't be Kodak, don't be Nokia. We'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, guys.